All right, everybody, welcome to Tuesday, December 3rd's regular session. Let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. We'd like to start with roll call.
Mayor Bagley.
Here.
Council members Christensen. Hidalgo Faring. Martin. Peck. Rodriguez. Here. Waters. Here. Mayor, you have a quorum.
All right, let's say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, just a quick reminder, anyone wishing to speak at first call, public invited to be heard, you need to get your name on the list. I don't have that list yet. Awesome. Cool. And so get on that list. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. No matter how much we love or hate what you're saying, we'll have to cut you off after 3 minutes. No worries. If you'd like to say something at the end, you can stick around and say something at the final call, public invited to be heard. Let's move on to approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the November 12th, 2019 regular session? All right, that passes unanimously. All right, let's. Do I have a motion for passage and acceptance of the November 19th, 2019 regular session minutes? All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. All right, and that passes unanimous. Submission of documents and motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to future agendas. Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two motions I want to make tonight. The first one is basically a few months ago, council held our third session on homelessness. And because of complaints from residents and from the police department, that conversation veered toward safe lots. Chief Butler made a statement at that meeting that he wanted to do his own research with sheriff's departments, police departments of other municipalities that had safe lots, and the mayor asked for more data. So because of that, I move that this research and data be brought back to council at a regular session in January of 2020.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there anyone who would like, Councilmember Christensen, you're in the queue. Do you want to say anything to that? All right. All right, there's nobody in the queue, so let's go ahead and vote. Actually, before we vote, can you do that? That's going to interfere. We're good? All right, perfect. Let's go ahead and vote. Sorry, Dr. Waters? Sorry.
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. I just wanted to check if we're going to have all the data we need or the research completed in January. That's great. I wouldn't want to cut it off if February, at the first meeting in February, it would be completed, just so we have as robust a report as we can get from Mike. Is January good?
I need to check with them. We've got multiple people working on different components of this, and so I just need to touch base with them to see where they are in that process.
Councilmember Peck?
Thank you. And of course, if you can't make that timeline, you can come back and say, we need a couple more weeks.
Okay.
It's fine.
I just don't know the specifics right now, but we've got 2 to 3 different teams working on different components of this, pulling it together.
I guess I'll vote for it. I'll vote for it, but I guess I would rather see just direction to staff to say, set a deadline. But that is not the motion. The motion on the table is to direct staff to bring back the safe lot research sometime in January. So let's go ahead and vote. All right, that passes unanimously. All right, thank you. And Councilmember Peck, you still have the floor?
Thank you. I do have another motion. It's kind of in the same vein. So this past late spring and summer of 2019, Council okayed a pilot program for park ambassadors for LDDA, park rangers, I guess, for LDDA and emergency night sheltering for the homeless at 2 locations in Longmont. We also asked that a comparative report from previous summers on police reports and council complaints to be brought back to council to see if these pilot programs worked, moved us forward. So I move that staff submit a report to council at, again, a regular session, and this data probably is going to be comparative to the first motion. In January, as to the effects to the city on the pilot sheltering program, the Downtown Park Ambassadors Program, and comparative years police reports on calls involving the homeless. So that, let me explain well, first, do I have a second? Okay, what I'm trying to get at is, did these pilot programs work? Is it worth continuing them? And the only way we can do that is compare to previous years on calls, police reports, and what happened downtown.
Harold, do you have something to say?
So the DDA component, when council directed this, directed it in December. And so I believe their Kimberly and the Ranger program is scheduled to come next week or on the 17th. So, but that's not so there's another component that's not along the same lines that may take a little bit more time to cross-tab the data based on those
Councilor
other
Peck?
issues.
Once again, just let us know.
Yep.
We can extend it.
All right. Councilmember Christensen. Well, I'm assuming you're in the queue for,
Yes.
for this motion?
No, I'm in the queue for the next
All
one.
right, then, yeah, right. Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I just wanted to add that while the LDDA data is going to be coming up real soon now because you had direction on that, I think that Councilmember Peck is asking good questions about cross-correlating the data. But I bet there are questions that haven't necessarily been asked before. And so do we want to ask for, as Mayor Bagley said, a time, a deadline when the staff thinks it can be ready with that cross-correlation?
Councilmember Peck?
Oh,
I wouldn't mind that, but for example, actually, that's a good idea. So, do you want to amend this motion then, or for the date? So I'll amend my motion, not emotion, to say that, would you please put this on the agenda as soon as you can? Thank you.
Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. Just to clarify, we're still going to get the LDDA report at our next meeting.
Correct.
And then this bigger set of questions at a future date.
Yeah, I need to get with Matt Lee and the people that do all the statistics to figure out what's it going to take.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to delay the LDDA report.
No, that's scheduled.
Yeah, good, thanks.
All right, so there is a motion on the table asking for city staff to bring that back as soon as possible. All right, let's go ahead and vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Councilmember Christensen.
As per Council Rules of Procedure 17.5, motion instructing the city manager or city attorney, unless such duty is imposed by the charter, ordinances of the city, or otherwise by operation of law, direction to the city manager or city attorney to take action on behalf of the city council shall be made pursuant to motion duly made, seconded, and approved by the majority of the quorum of council made at regular or specially called meeting or at a study session of council. I would like to move to instruct city manager and city attorney to place on the next regular session, December 17th agenda, a first reading ordinance, removing residential development from eligibility from special or metro districts, commencing 10 days after the passage of the ordinance. Second reading of the ordinance to take place at the first regular session of council on January 14th. Do I have a second? This is a simple, clear, and fair one-sentence ordinance, and there's ample time to draft a one-sentence ordinance in the next 2 weeks, particularly as this has been previously discussed with the city attorney.
All right, there are people in the queue. I guess the only objection I would have to the motion is that it's a motion to do something rather than a motion to put it on future agenda. So I mean, I wouldn't have any problem debating it or talking about it on a future agenda. I would have a problem moving forward with the process. Councilmember Martin?
I would be willing to entertain taking this matter up on a future agenda, but I think that it's fairly appalling to try to rush it through so that there is no time for making a case against this. Now, as it happened, I have a very strong case against doing this. First of all, it makes the council look completely frivolous because it's reversing a decision taken only a very few months ago. Second, it is, it's almost willfully ignoring data since we only have one example of such a district being approved, and by all accounts, the result of that, although it hasn't come up out of the ground yet, appears to be beneficial for the city on every axis. The service plan that we approved does not allow the builders to make more money than they put into it in addition to a regular return on their investment. It demonstrates that both the expected purchase price of the homes in the district and the 30-year cost of living in those homes are both lower than if the district tax didn't exist. And I believe that the city can ensure that result with every district, regardless of the incompetence of previous councils who didn't manage to ensure the right kind of safeguards. And I'd like an opportunity to demonstrate that. So I will not vote for something as rash as this. I just can't do that.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I have had numerous conversations with fellow council members one-on-one about this issue, knowing it was going to come up based on the sheer concept that it was a tightly split vote when we approved the allowance of metro districts, as well as approved the service plan that was referenced by Councilmember Martin. And I believe that there are legitimate concerns on the opposite side as to the efficacy of metro districts and the appropriateness in the city of Longmont for metro districts and residential areas. So I would be in favor of bringing this back up for debate to also allow our newly elected representative, Councilmember Hidalgo Faring, to chime in. And as such, I would like to suggest that it be brought to first either a study session or some other special session where the council can have an open dialogue with each other concerning their best wishes and worst fears concerning metro districts in general, versus a straight repeal of the previous decision that was a 4-3 split decision. As such, I would prefer that that be the motion on the floor and bring it to an agenda, as well as just to remind council that we are voting on bringing something to an agenda, not actually debating the merits of the issue tonight.
Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. So my comments are predictable, I guess, based on how we voted in the past. But I'm going to concur with Mayor Pro Tem's comments. I think we ought to have a robust discussion about this and any other tool that helps or doesn't, obstructs accomplishing our objectives, our affordable housing objectives. But to direct tonight the specifics of an ordinance seems to me ill-advised, and I don't want to debate the merits of metro districts, but in terms of how we approach this. I would like to think that we're concerned that we all care about affordable housing. It's not that none of us don't care, we do. We might disagree over what are the tools or the best ways to use them to accomplish our objectives. But it seems to me a disservice to us and a disservice to the community if we don't have a full, robust conversation about not just there are certainly lots of worst case examples of metro districts where their abuses have occurred and residents are the victims of those abuses. There are also lots of best case examples, good examples where costs have been controlled and residents well served. And it seems to me that wherever we end up with this, we ought to craft policy based on best, not worst case scenarios, or best, not worst case examples. And my fear is that we could rush to this and you make a decision. And I've said this before. I always think the worst case makes for bad policy, and that's what this would be. So I'm going to vote against the motion. Not that we wouldn't have a robust discussion. And I would like personally to involve developers and residents and the Land Conservancy at the recent ribbon cutting for the Wee Cottages, a chance to visit with both the builder and the Land Conservancy that partnered on that project, and having a chance to visit with both. My question was, would you have been able to reduce costs on these units even more had you been able to finance through a metro district? And the answer from both of them was yes. Now, I don't know how that doesn't advance our affordable housing objective, but I'm voting no on this motion. I would love to be part of engaging the community and those who have vested interests in the tools, as well as the beneficiaries or the potential victims, in the kind of conversation that allows us to make the most thoughtful, wisest decision to do the greatest good for the largest number in this community.
Have you spoken on this yet? No. Councilmember Peck.
Thank you. I would like to amend the motion that we bring this back to the first study session do we have a study session before our break?
Next week.
Next week. Do we have a full agenda for next week? We do.
Yes.
Is there anything you can take off of it?
Don, what? I can't. Do you remember what's on it? We have LED. So we have the DDA, we have the stormwater discussion on some stormwater items that are coming the following week on the 17th, and then electric regulations coming on the 17th. And then Windy Gap, which will be on the 17th.
So no.
That's what, I mean, ultimately, if council will need to move those presentations then to the 17th agenda.
Well, I would like to amend it that to be on the study session in December, the next study session that we have, and that it not be a study session including developers. We've already had two community conversations with developers in the inclusionary zoning ordinance. So I would just like the council to discuss this. We've all researched it and bring back our own reasons for voting for or against it. So my motion is, I would like to amend the motion on the table to not have it be an ordinance that we bring back, but be put on as a discussion at the next study session. Do I have a second?
She doesn't have to approve the amendment it doesn't have to be friendly, but then we have to vote on it if there's a second. I guess I was looking up in my little Robert's Rules of Order thing. I guess my only, again, going to the amendment, is that we have a city or a council policy that we agreed on that we were going to tell city staff what to do, and then they look at their agenda, figure out what's important, and then put it into the barrel, so to speak, to make sure that we don't overload them. And so I just don't, as we starting off this new council session, I just want to make sure that we're not constantly every week saying next month, because they're going to get overburdened again. But there's a motion on the table, Can you repeat the motion, Councilmember Christensen, exactly, so I can restate it? Sorry. Oops, sorry, microphone.
I would like to say that this is a motion that would require a first and a second reading, which would give us ample time to discuss this. And we already have discussed this many times. Here was my motion. I move to instruct city manager and city attorney to place on the next regular session, December 17th agenda, a first reading ordinance removing residential development from eligibility from special or metro districts. This would be this would be active commencing 10 days after the passage of the ordinance. Second reading of the ordinance would take place at the first regular session of council on January 14th.
All right.
I
so-
would be open to an amendment to have a study session, but we have already had numerous discussions of this. And when we passed the first metro district, we had no discussion whatsoever. None.
Okay.
And whereas three members of council have met repeatedly outside of this body with one developer in order to pass this. So I am happy to
point
have
order.
this be
Point
a
order.
second.
Point of order? Well, point of order, let's keep it to the issue. rather
That
than
is the issue.
personalities and
No, it has nothing to
accusations.
do with personalities. It has to do with core open records, which
All right, well, then let's keep it to the motion
Okay.
and not
Anyway,
not
I would be
accusations.
happy to amend it to have this, to have us participate at a study session and discuss this some more, if that is what people would like.
Let's hear from Councilmember Susie Hidalgo-Faring.
Well, first, I was going to bring up a point of order. So you felt that this motion was a friendly amendment, or this amendment was a friendly amendment. So then we do not have to vote on, oh, no, we do, yes.
Well, no,
To
just-
vote,
just if- If she
So
wants
we
to-
do not have to vote on the amendment, so we're voting on the whole thing. So I don't think it's a rash decision, because I think when we put the idea or the notion of residential special districts on hold for now, it gives us the opportunity to look carefully at what's going to happen with this Mountain Brook development that opens up. We can look at the data to show if this indeed is something that will be beneficial for our community. I've read different case scenarios, both positive and negative, for different communities, but they're not Longmont. So really, I want to know how this is going to look like in our community. And having an ordinance, or just a single sentence, I think that will open the door for us to have conversation about it. If it goes through, then we can decide at a later time, hey, we want residential special districts, and we can look to change that then. But for now, I think it's being careful. I would approve this, so.
Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagel. I see it just exactly the opposite. I think that ends discussion. It doesn't invite discussion. But I'd ask, do we have any Metro District applications in the queue right now?
We're hearing from a few that are interested in bringing it forward.
But for an application to be prepared, we get the pre-app. We have to authorize the allocation of time to review and work with their counsel, whatever. So there are none in the queue. If there were any in the queue, we would get a chance to make a decision of whether or not they are meritorious enough to commit resources, even to engage with whoever is submitted the application. Correct?
So the way the process is, they submit a letter to us, we bring the letter to council, we say, do you want us to work on this? Council says yes or no, we want you to work on this, and then we work on that.
Do you have any of those letters sitting on your desk?
I don't have any that have come to me. I don't know if any have made it to Joni. I know there's people been asking.
I'm certain there's a keen interest, but there is nothing to drive this into a decision-making process without taking a little more measured approach. Wherever we end up, we end up. You know, the votes will fall where the votes are going to fall at the time that we end up taking a vote. But to try to jump into this when there's no urgency for it, I think requires some explanation. What is the urgency when we have nothing in the queue, and we don't want to give ourselves an opportunity to make the smartest possible decision? And if the smartest possible decision is to eliminate them, then we'll eliminate them or prohibit them. But until we've had a chance to look at the range of success stories and failures, I don't know how we get there to make the most thoughtful possible decision based on best cases.
Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I just try to examine what seems to be happening here. Because Councilmember Hidalgo Faring, the motion isn't what you stated that it was. It isn't putting it on hold. It's repealing it. Maybe somebody talked to you about putting it on hold, but that's not what this motion was. And I also think that Councilmember Peck's amendment is very interesting because she wanted to make sure that no stakeholders other than the council were allowed to speak. No information would be allowed to be introduced. So what exactly, as Councilmember Waters said, is the rush? We could certainly put new applications on hold until we've had our study session. And maybe until we've taken some of the actions that would come out of such a study session. But what is the importance of getting this out of our code? I remember when we were on the verge of passing what Councilmember Christensen is trying to repeal. And 2 council members and a member of the community called me to tell me that I couldn't possibly vote for this. And all 3 of them followed the same pattern, which is they talked and I didn't.
Hold on.
And I'm
There's
not calling anybody out, I'm just saying that it
Councilmember Martin,
happened.
just time out 1 second. Point of order, that's all right. What's the point of order?
We're really not staying on issue here. This isn't a discussion about who called you. This is a discussion about putting it on the
Microphone,
agenda.
microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hold on, I'll clear it. Yeah, you'll get the floor back, yeah.
This isn't really a discussion about what happened during the last motion to put this on, to okay the ordinance. This is supposed to be a discussion about whether we are going to put it on a study session or first reading on an ordinance. So I think the whole point of putting it on a study session is to have that conversation at the study session.
All right.
This motion right now is just whether we are doing this
I'm going to
or not.
overrule the point of order. No, not of course I am. It's just that you did not state an applicable reason pursuant to Robert's Rules of Order. You stated an opinion. That's it. And the chair made a motion, or you made a motion. I made a ruling. Councilman Martin.
The point of my discussion was something that I hope that the people voting on Councilmember Christensen's motion will consider, which is what reason for the hurry and what reason for wanting to, seemingly want to suppress relevant information about this. I find that very puzzling. I find the hurry very puzzling. I find the desire to exclude relevant data and relevant testimony, very puzzling. And I was explaining that this is not something new, but that it was also, there was an amazing tendency from the very beginning not to listen to information about this matter. And so I really think that it's important that everybody gets a chance to speak, because it's extremely important to this city, and it's not important just for affordable housing. It's affordable, it's for microgrids, it's for energy efficient buildings, it's for the climate emergency, it's for childcare. And I don't think we know enough about this matter, and I think everyone should wonder, what is everybody's interest in suppressing data about what is ultimately nothing more than a means of financing something?
All right. There's been a motion to call the question.
I call the question.
All right. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I think the discussion at the dais has become quite obvious that we do need to sit down and have this discussion amongst ourselves as council members. And I do also think that there's a reason for the expediency behind the question, in the sense that we need to make sure our policy is clear when it comes to development in the city of Longmont, one way or the other. Being ambiguous is going to play a detriment either way, whether we continue to allow them or if we repeal them. Having ambiguous policy is not efficient for a city to run its due course of business. And so that's why I think it is beneficial to at least have the discussion sooner than later.
Councilmember Christensen.
The reason I think we should act, and this would be, we wouldn't be passing anything until January 14th, which is well over a month from now. The reason for a sense of clarity is exactly what Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez said. Developers need to understand, need to be able to not be impeded in their development. They need to understand how they're going to build their financial stack. They need to know whether this is going to be on or off. And if we delay discussing this for months and months, it puts them in a very bad position in trying to continue with their development. We have a lot of very good developers who are coming to town and would like to know whether they can develop things. My reasons for this are what I have stated before. Residential and special metro districts have no oversight. DOLA is a political, it creates a political subdivision of the state. DOLA only collects filings. They do not check them. They have no enforcement ability or
sorry,
oversight.
hold on. There was a point of order from the Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second. Yeah.
It's discussion of merits, and that's not what
Okay, that's fine.
I would overrule them, but go ahead.
All right, well.
We're all beyond
No,
the 2 minutes.
we have stated these things before, so this is not that we have no reason for this, and we're trying to rush this through for no reason at all. It is so that we don't impede development, and so that people have a right, developers have a right to know, as Mayor Pro Tem said, what our city policy is. This gives them a right to know what their situation is in the city of Longmont.
All right, and the one person's left in the queue, Susie Hidalgo-Faring. I was going to make one comment and then give you the last word, or do you want to go now? Okay, go now.
I don't need the last word. So my intent of supporting a study session and a hearing is to have a robust conversation, to be able to discuss this, to make up my mind on whether or not I'd approve an ordinance or not. So it's really having that open transparency and the opportunity to hear all sides. So that is my hope, and that is why I'm supporting this, for this study session, the first and second hearing, so I can hear as much information as I can to make an informed decision down the line.
Okay.
I
I'm
need to
gonna, can I, I'm gonna, the art was, if I'm careful, can I share some information?
I don't know what you're referring to.
The meeting that we had, the developer.
You can't, I mean,
Okay, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so here's my concern, right? Here's my concern. And I don't want to, he wasn't, I don't think, this is all public information if you're to go look. So we are going to be presented with the following scenario, right? And this just happened this week. And I'm glad there are certain people in the audience who are aware of the history of this project. We are going to be dealing with the Life Bridge project again. They will be selling that property to a developer. That developer will be developing in Firestone. That project will contain a special or metro district. If it is not within Longmont, we have no control. Zero. This will be on the border of our town. This will be on the border of our open space. It is happening. The meeting was essentially about, well, how do we make it so we have a say? And so I asked Harold to conduct an executive, or call an executive session for the purpose of getting legal advice on de-annexation and annexing somebody into Longmont, and B, determining our negotiating position when we're discussing this with Firestone and with the developer. Now, we can decide not to. We can just say, you know what, out of principle, we don't want it. But it's being built, it's going to be a special or metro district. And it's going to be under the ordinances of Firestone. And we can't stop it unless we have this tool in the box. So we can have this now, but all we're doing is limiting ourselves, and that issue is coming up like imminently. Or I don't even know if that's a word. Imminently? Is that a word? Okay, it's all right. So it's imminent. And so I would like to have that discussion, that executive session, to talk about this, and then come back and have this conversation about whether or not we want to remove this tool from the toolbox. Because if it's not in there, they're not going to come with us. They're going to stick with Firestone. So nobody's in the queue. Let's vote. Actually, you've
I
said-
need to
Yeah.
clarify a couple
Yeah.
of things. So in terms of what's in the queue, there are three. Council voted that before we bring those three back, that we have a study session, and then that got caught up in the election cycle. So I think it was in May of 2020, and we also said we weren't going to have time to even look at those based on the one. So I wanted to be clear on that. There were three. Council said don't bring anything else forward, then have a study session. And I believe that was in May of 2020. I forgot about that when the question was asked.
Okay. I'm going to restate the motion and not doing any shenanigans. We can have another motion after this because the motion was quite specific and contained dates, right? So the motion on the table that we're going to vote on is to instruct staff, or the city attorney and the city staff, to bring forth at the regular session of December 17th a very simple ordinance for first reading that removes the residential development metro and or special district provision from our city ordinances. And then to bring back for second reading on January 14th at the regular session, the second reading. It will become law 10 days thereafter. That was not it? Did you accept, Councilmember? And so what was the amendment? That we're just going to bring it? Go ahead, sorry.
Could I say a
Yeah,
word?
yeah, go ahead.
It does not remove it, it simply makes residential development ineligible for special and metro districts. There is a difference.
And what was the amendment?
I do
then?
accept the amendment to have a study session. before. Yes.
Okay, all right. So there's been the original person who made the motion and the council member who seconded it. There's now, we're basically bring
You
it
want-
back to discuss, specifically removing residential development from metro and special districts, making them ineligible,
week.
residential.
Is what I heard.
Are you saying next week, Councilmember Christensen? At the next study session or the next study session?
Well, I just don't want the developers to be left wondering what's going on. you
It'll
know?
be next week.
What is your motion?
Okay. Well, at the earliest possible opportunity.
Uh,
No.
It sounds like it fails for lack of second.
All right.
Go ahead.
The amendment was to bring it back at the next study session, which is why I asked Harold if we could move stuff off of that study session. So it's at the next study session, which would be next week.
I'm only going to vote against it if that, actually, the motion has been amended to say, bring back next week at the study session, the topic of removing residential development from the metro and special districts provision. It's been moved and seconded. Nobody else is in the queue. I'm going to vote against it only because, again, I'm not saying the motion's out of order, but we have a policy. We can't just keep telling staff whenever we have an idea that concerns us to do it next week, do it next week, do it next week, do it next month. We've got RTD coming up. We've got, I mean, they're human, and I know they get tired. Councilmember Martin?
I'm going to vote against it because I think it's a bad idea, but I would also like to point out that not only do we have that policy that the mayor just described, but we actually have, as the city manager read out to us once he had a chance to look into the history of the matter, we already have that study session on the schedule. So why would we not simply do it in the appropriate course of time and let higher priority matters take priority? Again, I wonder why this is considered such a high priority when it doesn't have any immediate effects, especially since it's because you hate it, Polly. It's because,
Hold on.
no, wait a minute.
Well, there's a point of order, but the chair will make it. All council members need to make sure that we don't talk out of turn. And
I apologize.
Well, there was multiple, so I'm just making a general one. So
I think that it's very, it's very strange that there's some rush over this, especially since if we had a special district proposal, all we would have to do is vote it down if it came up in the meantime. So no, let's do it in May.
all right, nobody's in the queue. Let's vote.
Yeah, I want to be clear. The motion was made in May when of 2019 to bring it back into a study session. It wasn't to bring it back in May.
All right. Well, the motion right now is just bring it back next week to study session to talk about it. So let's vote. All right, and the motion passes with Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, Councilmember Peck, Councilmember Christensen, and Councilmember Hidalgo Faring, all for, and then myself, Dr. Waters, and Councilmember Martin against. So we'll see
To
you next week.
facilitate the agenda, we're just going to put the information that we had in the previous conversation there for council, not knowing what specific questions are.
And then if it is also, can we include, please, on the agenda, the issue that I mentioned, to the extent possible, prior to the executive session? What I mean is the development,
Yeah.
the issue, because I mean, that is pertinent, meaning
Okay.
that is my concern about getting rid of the
We'll have
special
to, Eugene and
districts.
I'll have to
I know,
chat.
but, yeah.
So.
All right, let's move on. Oh, yes, yeah, point of inquiry, Councilmember Christensen.
That's a pending legal issue.
Correct.
That has to be an executive session. Is that what you said?
No, what I'm saying is that the issue I raised with
Yes.
the Life Bridge sale
Land,
and the development is that is pertinent to this conversation. So I want to make sure when we have that conversation, everybody's aware of, look, this is coming, and are we going to either just say, we don't
Well-
care, or are we going to engage the developer to try to get them to annex into Longmont, de-annex from Firestone, and have some say in what goes on the back porch of our town?
I understand that, but we usually don't discuss pending legal issues with.
No, it's not a pending legal issue. It's what I'm just saying is, the topic is coming.
All right.
And I want council to, I mean, I was told, so you guys can know. And then we'll go into executive session and have Eugene tell us what's up. That's it. And so what you can and cannot say is my point is just, I want them aware. That's it. I want the data out there so that we at least have it. All right. Dr. Waters?
I'll have my own, I guess, point of inquiry. Is that the right language?
Well, I just saw it in the Robert's Rules of Orders book, so yeah.
But the inquiry is, we're excluding, are we excluding any others other than the 7 of us in this conversation?
That was
Is
not, that was not part of the motion.
So others could be invited. For example, I'm just curious because I'd like to know how to follow up. We have a whole bunch of folks who have rallied around our early childhood goal and interests. And there are folks in rallying around our goal who are seriously in conversation about the prospects of special early childhood education districts, which would be a residential district. And I would like to include them in this conversation. This isn't just about developers. This is about interests like those advocates of and for our youngest and most vulnerable children, about whose quality of life we're so deeply concerned, because I heard a lot about that during the campaign, that they would have a voice in this conversation about what to do or not to do with the kind of instruments that help us to advance those objectives.
As of right now, next week's a study session. Anybody is free to attend council meeting. We've got a public invited to be heard that anyone can state their 3 minutes. I currently do not have any plans, nor do I think I have the authority to, adjust the agenda to the extent that maybe put on and off, et cetera, but I don't know how we would do that at the next study session short of a motion and some ideas.
I just think we owe it to those. It's not just developers. We have a whole community here. The governor's office is interested. There's a lot of interest in what's going on here. But that's one of the options for advancing on this objective. And if they don't have a voice in it, then they ought to know that. If they do, then they ought to be encouraged to attend.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I would just like to also point out that if during the course of discussion at this study session next week, that we decide we need to convene a special meeting, such as we had during the inclusionary zoning process, where we need to bring in subject matter experts, we have the authority to do that next week as well.
Councilmember Christensen? And then we're going to go ahead and move on after you
Yes,
say what you
let's
say.
do that. We have 660 pages to get through. I would like to point out that library districts and child care districts or early education districts have nothing to do with residential development. That is not, by state law, that is not what we're talking about. We are talking about residential development.
All right. I would like to thank all of council for their comments and their lively discussion. All right, let's move on. Do we have any special reports or presentations tonight, Harold? We do not, do we?
I do, actually.
go ahead. Sorry.
I've asked Bob Allen, we all have been posed
snow,
a number
yes.
of questions regarding snow.
Snow removal.
And so I've asked Bob Allen to give a brief presentation on this storm and our process and procedures and give you all a chance to ask us questions.
If the sun had not come out, we would have a lot of angry people here, but Thankfully, the sun came out. Mr. Allen?
Mayor and Council, excuse me, Bob Allen, Director of Operations, Public Works and Natural Resources. I don't have a formal presentation tonight, but did have a couple of comments. First of all, I wanted to thank you for the resources that you have provided us in recent years for snow and ice removal and what you've approved for next year. They are more than sufficient to keep our transportation network or system open through the winter months, so thank you for that. Secondly, this storm was a unique storm, also a rare storm, in that it created conditions that prevented us from using really all the tools that we would normally use for this kind of deployment, particularly for a rapidly developing and moving storm that really was pretty intense for a while. Normally, we're able to do anti-icing operations as well as de-icing operations, and for this storm, we were not able to do anti-icing. So it created conditions where we had a lot of ice now on the road. By and large, we've met the goals of our snow removal plan. We've been able to keep the network open for emergency access, emergency services. We've been able to keep it open for transit services. Unfortunately, it's taken us longer to restore roads to normal conditions, and that's somewhat to be expected for this type of storm anyway, but unfortunately, we have a lot more ice on the road than what we would normally have. We do, as you know, plow arterials and collector roads. We don't normally plow residential neighborhoods. To do so would require at least twice the resources we have now. That means probably $25 to $30 million worth of more equipment and probably another $1 million per year to do that. Cities in the dry west tend not to do that. It's not a standard of practice. In the Midwest and the East, you see more of that, but keeping in mind that that snow's on the road for most of the months of the year, where here we actually get down to pavement from just the solar, from sublimation, solar drying and evaporation. So, with that, I didn't really have much else to say other than I know that a number of you had questions, and I thought this would be a good forum to do that. And let me also say that we don't get better without critique and criticism, so that's welcome too. All I can do is if it's something that you suggest that would require resources, then I would articulate it back in the form of future budget requests or appropriations to do something different. But with that, yeah, we don't get better without hearing some of the harder comments. So whatever you have, let's hear it. And I'll give you my best attempt to answer.
All right. Councilmember Peck?
Thank you, Mayor. Bob, one really good thing about this storm is that I did not get any traffic complaints. No one could speed, so that was great. And having spent the weekend in Denver, those roads were exactly the same. They were a mess, as well as Boulder. But the best explanation I got actually came from our city manager about why this storm was different, and it had to do with the rain and the clouds. So could you explain that again, Harold?
So Bob and I will tag team this one.
Okay, great.
So basically, in terms of the arterials and collectors, we normally put down
brine, anti-icing.
Anti-icing brine.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't able actually to do that in this storm because the rain was actually forecast ahead of it, and it would have been ineffective in that case. And so that was part of the issue in terms of the arterial and collectors. Then you actually had a tremendous amount. So then you had the rain come in. Then you had the freezing temps, which then created the ice. If you have an inclined driveway like I have, just shoveling it was a challenge because I was slipping at the same time I was shoveling that driveway. I actually bit it a couple of times, I'm not proud to say. And so you had that issue, and then you just had the massive amounts of snow that were coming down at that time. And so that was really the layer of issues. And then it was extremely cold, and it was cloudy, and we didn't have the normal interaction of sun. with the snowfall that we have here, and so that then delayed the melting process. I actually was able to leave this afternoon, and the streets this afternoon were much different than they were when I came in this morning. And so that was really the challenges that we faced. And when you have, this was and so I've been here 8 years. This was the largest event that I've seen, but in talking to Bob and Dale, this was one of the largest events that they've seen. And then depending on where you are, when you look at this is Harold's take on it, looking at his front yard. When you look at the snowing or the sun angle compared to trees and homes, that's another factor that comes into play. My front yard is probably going to be in snow for quite some time because it's almost always in the shade. Bob, did I miss anything?
No, that was a good description.
Okay, I do have one more thing, and I think I know the answer, but for the resident who contacted me, well, actually, it was 2 or 3. Because of the plowing, it plowed in their driveways with several feet of snow. So the question was, when you plow, is it possible to put the snow in the median area in the middle to create a wall there rather than putting it on people's driveways so that they can't get out even if they shovel their driveway?
Mayor and Councilmember Peck, it's not. So the road is actually designed, first of all, the road is crowned, and it's designed for the snow to be moved and water, right, when it rains, to all move to the outer edge where the storm drainage system sits. If you put snow toward the middle, it does 2 things. It, first of all, could block a view of control signs, stop signs, stop lights, other, particularly at larger roads, it can block that view. So we're really not allowed to do it for that reason. But probably to me, the biggest reason not to do it is then that melts all winter long and creates black ice across the lane as it goes out to the edge. And now you've got slippery conditions for many weeks or months instead of just a few days.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Christensen.
Bob, I wanted to thank you for, first of all, sending out a very informative email today that we can use to explain things to people. I think we've all gotten some complaints. There have been complaints in the paper, and I know people are frustrated. And there are people who are in very difficult conditions, like the 78-year-old woman whose driveway is blocked. She can't shovel out at 78. And she needed to go visit somebody who is sick. And that's very frustrating. I wish we could figure out something to do to help people like that, because it truly can be, life-threatening, or certainly create a terrible situation. I do want to thank your crew. I know they were out until 3 in the morning working, and I don't think people realize that. And I thought that all in all, things were remarkably more clear than I expected, given the amount of snow and the timing and all the things that Harold mentioned. So I just wanted to say that although there have been a lot of complaints, I think you guys did a very good job overall, and thank you.
Would like to, we did in one of the emails we put out, we have information on programs that do assist individuals in those cases. I will have Sandy send that out again, and we'll make sure we really get that out into the community.
I'd also like to say, when we have these types of conditions and we have blocked sidewalks or driveways or whatever, I feel that I have instruction from Harold to go out and resolve problems and ask questions later about who is responsible. If we need to deal with a code issue, we'll do that. But if we need to go out there and help, particularly for a disabled person in the community, we do everything we can to get them out and moving. So.
All right, Councilmember Susie Hidalgo-Ferring.
Thank you. So some of the things that did come up from constituents, and I received pictures too of businesses and parking lots where they had not been shoveled or taken care of, and it was just sheet of ice. So what is the recourse that people have who work in these facilities or who utilize these facilities? We had to dig my daughter out of her apartment, their parking lot, because her car was inundated with snow and nobody had plowed or moved snow. So it's still there to this day.
Mayor and council, that's a good question. We do not have rules or regulations for private property, so there isn't much we can do. There are other rules that the city doesn't necessarily enforce directly that may require property owners to comply with ADA regulations or what we call PRO-WAG regulations that are abut right-of-way. Really, the only areas that we can enforce on are sidewalks that are not plowed or that are not shoveled. And I will tell you, a lot of businesses in Longmont do not shovel their walks and on time, and it's very disappointing to see that. What I have done is I've actually, I'm on a number of Rolodexes out there for disabled persons who have hard times getting by, particularly businesses or even our properties where we have not removed snow fast enough, and we go out there and quickly either do an enforcement or move snow. But private areas, those are really more up to the property owners.
It's a public safety issue too, and being a good neighbor. So we ask that gets taken care of.
Councilmember Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. Bob, I'd like to just get on the record the reasons for the level at which the city is resourced. And I want you to know that I think you guys did a great job. I think that you made the decision to switch the plowing policy at just the right time. I understand that it was the soonest that decision was ever made. And I'm aware of the number of people who were working how much overtime, including our city manager, although I don't think he gets paid overtime. But I think the city did everything that it could. But a lot of people believe that the city was under-resourced for this. Sure. So I think you said the city would need twice the number of plows to plow everything all the time. What's the order lead time on a plow, the kind of snow plow in the city's fleet? If you decided you needed one at some time in the future, how far back would you have to order it?
Generally to get something like that equipped and delivered is probably a 3 to 6 month period of time.
Yeah. So even when we got the prediction that this was going to be a hard winter, it was already too late. Yeah. And the other thing is, if we have twice as many snow plows as we normally need, what do you think the cost of just keeping those idle snow plows maintained, stored? Do we even have a place to store twice the number of snow plows that we own today?
Mayor and council, certainly a good question. The equipment mostly sits unused, the snow removal equipment, when we don't have a storm. Mm-hmm. With the exception that some of that equipment is used for other operations, like dump trucks and all. Mm-hmm. We have enough of those, so if we were to add more to the fleet, they would not have a use. We could certainly outsource some of that work, but there's not anyone that I know of that could actually deploy at the level we do here locally, not with the larger equipment we would need to be able to make the number of cycles we make per day on the roads that we do clear regularly. Mm-hmm. Then there's the staffing issue. We don't need, 15 or 20 more drivers. So we would have to find work, for those folks as well. There are always ways, to, even if inefficiently, find projects or some work to do, but it's not optimal, certainly. Mm-hmm. And it's not the standard of practice in this environment where things do melt pretty quickly, but there are some inconveniences.
Sure.
And storage, we would have to build additional storage, yes, mm-hmm. for more trucks.
Right. Okay. And then, of course, if you outsource the city's work to some of the private grounds maintenance people that have snowplows, then they wouldn't be plowing the apartment buildings, would they?
Well, I imagine that maybe over time they would tool up to do both, but a lot of them wouldn't really have the equipment. There are a lot of problems with doing that, by the way. As a government, we have some legal protections and immunities for doing the work, whereas private operators don't have that. So they do take on more risk than we do. But with that said, we do use companies like Excavating pretty regularly, and they can do or jump in and help, particularly during this storm. We're using them to do some snow removal in areas where we just don't have any more storage on the roads. But a good mix of that helps, but I think if you're talking about taking a private organization to come out and do the other half or more than half of the city streets at the same level that the city staff is doing right now, you would have challenges in doing that. And once again, different environments may keep rolling all winter long, but they do it very differently and on roads that are much narrower and snow-packed throughout the entire year. We have the luxury of being able to spend a lot of our resources on other programs in the city instead of putting them all into that program. But that's a policy choice that's in your purview and not mine.
And aren't you glad?
Yes.
I just want to thank the street teams, and please extend, I think, the whole council's congratulations on a heroic effort.
Yes, thank you. And I should say that, as with everything, it takes an entire organization. Public safety did an amazing job and helped us, and we communicated well with them. Our communications team and the city manager's office, frankly, took a lot of flack and fielded a lot of calls that would have really distracted us from doing our work. And it's like anything we do here. It takes all of us to get it done. Even you may think it's just over here or over there. So, whole team effort.
I would like to remind council that my great folks back here sent this. We had a similar conversation in 2016, and council instructed us to put it, for those of you who were on council at the time, to put it in terms of a survey, in terms of what the residents would like us to do. And we talked about, in order to take that next step, it would be a 10-cent increase to generate an additional, to the street sales tax to generate an additional 2.1 million. So the $1 million operationally, and then the capital component of this, in order to plow all the streets. And the results of that survey was strongly or somewhat supported by 51% of the community. And I think council at the time said, yeah, let's just continue operating in the way we're operating based on how we're staffed. So I just wanted to remind everyone that did occur a few years ago.
Dr. Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. I'll just, this is going to be redundant. I just want to add my thanks as well for your work. I appreciate Sandy's updates. My wife and I were out of town when the snow fell, but based on Sandy's updates, I could report to my wife we were going to have an experience when we got home, and we did. And then Bob was very responsive, as were Harold and Dale, when I started getting incoming from residents, and appreciated the response. And Councilmember Christensen mentioned 3 o'clock in the morning. I think, with the exception of a few hours on Thursday, they were out 24/7. And I think the community ought to know that, that they gave up their holiday, they gave up a lot to serve the community for one purpose, and that is safety. And I think everybody ought to extend their gratitude. I know it's frustrating. It's frustrating in everybody's neighborhood when you can't get out, or the roads are pretty chunky. So tonight we're going to talk about a climate emergency task force. Down the road, I've lived here 25 years. I think this is maybe the third epic snowfall in 25 years that was like this. If we start to see more of them, then then we ought to talk about policy and staffing and how much of our resource we commit to plows or other kinds of strategies. So that might be on the horizon, but for today, to commit to staff for epic snows and to equip for epic snows would not be the best use of tax dollars or personnel. So Thanks for your great work.
Councilmember Hidalgo Faring.
So, actually, a couple of questions. One being, well, first of all, yes, thank you. We do appreciate the hard work. And aside from the complaints, they were also aligned with people who were appreciative of the work and efforts that you guys had done. I additionally just am appreciative for the comments that I've received too. I only know what's happening in my realm, but to hear from what's happening to people across town or in apartment complexes, that was very beneficial. And as a council person, I felt, I appreciated both the responses that I got back from you, as well as input that I got from the community. And so something, and this is the teacher in me, just in reflection of what had happened, upon reflecting, what are some things that you would change? So if confronted with this situation again, how would you do things a little different? Would you do things different?
So I'll give you the same answer I gave the newspaper today, to be consistent.
Yeah.
We deployed exactly as we planned and exactly as we should have.
Uh-huh.
So the one deployment option that we exercised this storm was to go into the residential areas and plow.
Okay.
We don't do that a lot. So that's an area where we continue to evaluate, should we have done it? Should we have done it sooner and maybe reduce some of the efforts on other streets? Should we have waited longer? So those are really more the questions that we have. As far as deployment, our team did an excellent job. And in fact, they did a really good job on this storm. And we've had storms where we've done an average job and have had to learn from them. We actually did an excellent job on this one. The conditions truly were unique. Not being able to put a brine down when that rain hit just was a game changer, and then having that heavy snow on it.
Yeah, so it was kind of like
But,
the perfect storm.
It was, yeah, to use the cliche. But I also don't want to, you're not going to hear me come up here and say that about everything we do, because we do make mistakes and we do have subpar deployments at times. It's the nature of the work we do and sometimes the risks we take in changing things. I thought we did a really good job on this one.
And so some of what I heard you say is that you went out into some of the side streets, which you typically do not do.
No.
So then that takes not resources, but just trucks away from other areas as well, or it just makes it a little longer to hit to all the main roads and stretches.
That is true, though I think we did it at a time when there was enough lull in what we'd been doing. The storm had declined enough to where we could do it without too much lost effort. But yes, there's a little lost effort. There are other things we could possibly do, like instead of trying to do all the residential areas like that, would be to maybe have a select fewer of them that are more known problem areas. So we'll spend some time this spring looking and seeing, should we have done a few different road sections or some commercial areas or near some commercial areas that would have made it easier for folks, and just lived with some people not being happy that we didn't do anything in their neighborhood.
Okay,
So-
and then the second question was, if you had all the money in the world, what would be your priority as far as what you would need in order to successfully execute snow removal in this kind of situation?
I think to successfully implement snow removal would have to be defined, but if it is to clear residential neighborhoods at the same level that we did the arterials and collectors, that requires multiple, 20 to 30 passes per day and a lot of chemicals. In doing that, there are obvious trade-offs, including the impacts to the environment, which are significant, unfortunately. So that's a debatable question. I mean, it's a good question because there are a lot of different angles to that, and not enough for me to say tonight, but I would say if I had all that extra money and I didn't have to spend on snow removal, I'd probably spend on homelessness.
Yeah, that's true. Good answer.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. All right. All right, let's move on to first call, public invited to be heard. It's 8:15. We okay? We've only got 3. We can get through them, right? All right. And I'm sorry. I know I'm going to slaughter this name. I know there's a Vic here. Oh, Vic. What's the last name, sir? What's the last name? Vella, Vic Vella. Come on up. If you could all please state your name and address as you approach the podium, that'd be great.
Hi, my name is Vic Vella, 1114 Sherman Street, here in Longmont. Born and raised in this town. I'm 76 years old. Some of you said you've only been here 5, 10, 20 years, seen some storms. I'll tell you what, I've seen some storms. Now, my question, well, first of all, before I get into this road deal, I would like to take this personal opportunity to thank Joan, congratulate Joan for getting reelected, and of course Susie, the first Latino woman in the history of Longmont to be on city council. I've been here all these years, and I was hoping I would be alive to see that to happen. So I want to congratulate you on that, Susie. Now, that being said, I heard Bob, I believe, just now state that your number one priority is roads that has to do with emergencies like going to the hospitals and so on. Am I correct, Bob? Bob?
We usually don't. You're
Oh,
right.
I'm, okay,
Yeah,
I'm
we
sorry.
don't-
Okay, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, anyway, what I'm saying is, if that's the case, Thanksgiving morning, I was driving on Mountain View Avenue. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Mountain View Avenue is the main road that goes to the Longmont United Hospital. Am I correct? It does. Okay, now, if any of you was on that road on Thanksgiving Day going to on Mountain View Avenue, it seemed like a day and a half, like it hadn't even been plowed. And somebody's sitting here trying to tell me, or standing here trying to tell me that they priorities was those roads that leads to emergency, especially your seniors. A senior trying to drive on there, it's slick, you know, you're hitting stuff like that. I don't understand why you know it was coming, and why you're not constantly going over those same roads again because of the emergency, the hospitals and so on. I don't understand that. And the other thing is, you're talking about, I don't know how many outside contractors the city does, you know, to help with sidewalks or whatever. I see, you know, I know you source out to contractors. And you're saying, well, one thing we could have did was outside contractors to help remove the snow. Well, that costs money. Yes, it does cost money. But you know what's funny and appalling about all this, about the money, the staffing, and so on, is that some of you members wanted and voted to put on the bond to get a city rink and an aqua swimming pool here, which would have cost us taxpayers over $52 million for God knows how long. And we're talking about some money.
I'm going to have to cut you off for those 3 minutes, but we appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank
call
you.
me Vic, because I used to work for a living.
All right, great. Thank you. All right, let's go on to Karen Dyke.
Karen Dyke, 708 Hayden Court. I thought you were giving me the red light before I started.
Sit down.
Mr. Mayor and council members, the news this weekend was enough to make your head spin. I went from reading the words of Bill McKibben that winning slowly, we will still lose this battle against climate change. McKibben wrote his first book for general audiences on climate change in 1989. If we had heeded that call 30 years ago, slower action would have won. We also heard from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Sunday that the world's effort to stop climate change have been utterly inadequate so far, and there is a danger global warming could pass the point of no return. The Washington Post editorial this week entitled, "No one should want their children or grandchildren to live in that world," outlined the risks to the world while we refuse politically to enact even obvious solutions. A Monday opinion piece in the Washington Post by Eugene Robinson titled, "We are losing our climate battle. We have no one but ourselves to blame," states, "We of the boomer cohort will have long returned to dust before climate change begins to feel like an everyday five-alarm crisis. Our children will feel it, though, and our grandchildren will suffer in ways we can only begin to grasp. Future generations will be mystified and furious. They will see from the historical record that we knew what was happening, that we knew of ways to at least slow it down, a carbon tax, for example, and that we did almost nothing. That's the end of his quote. In the midst of these articles, serving as a call to action was an article in the Times Call that seems to be saying that PRPA shouldn't and won't try to reach 100% renewable energy because it will be too hard. Tonight, I encourage Longmont to continue to be bold, continue to advocate for PRPA to reach 100% renewable energy, move forward with this climate task force, engage more of the community in this movement. Remember, this is an emergency. This week, the Longmont Sunrise Movement is calling for a climate strike that coincides with world leaders gathering for the UN's annual climate conference. I invite everyone to join us December 6th, 6 p.m., 6th and Main, for the Longmont Climate Strike Rally. We will continue to work in the face of news that makes us want to stop. My grandchildren deserve a livable world. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, last but not least, Regina Cheney.
My name is Regina Cheney, and I live at 416 Main Street. Good evening, Mayor Bagley and council members. A few weeks ago, I spoke to council regarding allegations of political intimidation and conspiracy by Councilwomen Christensen and Peck. At that time, I also brought up Peck and Christensen using their personal email accounts to conduct city business. And I gave our city clerk an open records request for all Peck's and Christensen's emails relating to city business. This morning I met with our city clerk, and she informed me that Christensen told her she had 6 emails using her personal email account, and Peck said she had none. The city clerk also informed me that there may be as many as 1,600 emails sent or received from council members Christensen and Peck's private email accounts. Unless I misunderstand, it appears they are using their private email account to conduct city business. The city clerk estimates a total of 45 hours of staff time to complete research, retrieval, review, and delivery of all responsive documents. At $30 an hour, that's $1,350. Lying about the existence of these emails in and of itself is illegal and against sunshine laws and Colorado open records laws. Just the numbers alone are evidence of wrongdoing. 1,600 emails. To proceed with my request, a deposit of the full estimated cost of $1,350 is required. The public has a right to know about these emails. The rest of the council needs to know about these emails in order to police themselves. This is city business. Retreats with ethics facilitators are fine, but here is your chance to show your commitment and determination to police each other and hold each other accountable. I am requesting that the city waive the $1,350 fee and produce these emails for the public and the council members to review. If this is not possible, then I believe the city council has the obligation to the citizens of this community to pay for the research out of a city budget so that the city and the citizens can review them. Thank you.
All right, that concludes first call public invited to be heard. Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. I'm going to raise a question of personal privilege here. I don't know the specifics of what we just heard, but I will say that it should raise a concern among all of us. That a CORA request would require a $1,350 charge of a citizen simply in the exercise of holding us accountable seems extreme. I'm not crazy about the idea of waiving fees. It's real cost for our staff to spend time. But the request that the city cover the cost to put this issue behind us does make sense to me. So I'm going to move that we commit $1,350 from our contingency account to cover the cost, so we do not have to be in this conversation. There are enough other issues on the use of that level of use of personal email potentially to conduct city business. And I would need a second if that's going to happen.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Councilmember, let's go with Councilmember Peck.
Thank you. I question the statement that the city said that they had emails from our personal email account. I don't know how they would have gotten those. I have no idea how they would have gotten those, since they do not have access. Dawn, can you answer that, please?
I can, is it okay if I do it from here?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So
No,
when
please take the put. No, just, no, I'm kidding. No, go, that's, from this, fine.
When we received the open records request, we queried both Councilmember Peck and Christensen, who sent us both of those responses as stated by Ms. Cheney. Whenever there's a request for emails, because the request was so broad and did not specify, it said personal emails conducting city business, we realized by one of the emails provided that those emails were perhaps on city servers. So we ran a query, which is much like a Google search, and it tells you how many hits there are of those instances in our servers. And we have done no analysis of. It's just purely a number, and then we have to collect the resource before we do the work. So they're not necessarily responsive emails. As I explained to Ms. Cheney this morning, if I send an email to Mayor Bagley at his personal email, for example, and he forwarded it to his city email, and then that email was then forwarded to Councilmember Peck, and then that was forwarded to Harold, they're in our 4 hits.
I understand.
Does that make sense?
It does, because
That's
I
right.
get, to my personal email accounts, I get, because that is the email account that I give to the city as my account. So when I get a request from the city, a lot of times it comes to my personal email account, and I will reply to that. For example, I get updates to city recreation. The city recreation sends me updates on what's going on in the Parks and Recreation, or if Michelle sends me something about NLC, she may send it to me in my personal email account, and then if I reply to that. So I see what you're saying. It's not something that I originate from my personal email account. They're replies to city emails.
And just to be clear,
so,
Council,
okay.
yeah.
But I want Ms. Cheney to understand that. When I say that I don't have any correspondence from my personal email account, that means that I did not originate them.
And we understand.
So,
Thank you,
okay.
Councilmember. I was just going to
So
say.
I'll vote against this, because that is something that she wants. She wants the Cora request. It's not something that the residents asked for or council asked for. Thank you.
I was just going to clarify, we haven't done any analysis to look at those, to see what they are. We just ran a query. We have a number. That's all we've done.
Councilmember Christensen.
Yes, I do. I would like Ms. Cheney to understand that. I've been on city council for 6 years, so I am no doubt, for the same reasons as Councilman Peck, have thousands of emails in there, and I don't know the scope of what Ms. Cheney asked for, but certainly going through all my old emails will take quite some time, because as far as having us waive her fee, you know, the city gets many, many requests for Cora. And this is a statewide issue that that clerks brought up. because I serve on CML. They can't afford to pay for the time that it takes to do this unless the members of the public who are interested in this have to put forth something. This is only a portion of what it actually costs the clerk to spend the time to go over thousands of emails. So I think that would set a terrible precedent. I mean, I don't see how we can pay for everything that comes along, and so that would not be very fair if we granted this for one instance and not others. There have been many other instances recently of Cora requests, and no one has ever asked the city council to pay for the cost of gathering this.
I guess, just to be clear, so, all right, so the responses were 0 and 6, but did you just say that going through your emails will take some time? Did you not go through them?
Yes, I spent 15 hours going through my personal emails. And that's what I was able to get over 6 years. And if you read some of these, they are, one of them has to do with corresponding to someone who's a citizen here who helped a homeless man, and I wanted to know what her experience was and whether she had any suggestions. And she never wrote back, but that could arguably be city business. So that's the level that we're talking about. I put that on the email server, on my server, and gave it to Dawn, and that's available for anyone who wants to read that, but that was from 4 years ago. So yes, it took me 15 hours of my own time that no one is paying me for.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. As a point of clarification, I believe City Clerk Quintana said that the request was very broad. Could you maybe detail what the actual request was?
Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Rodriguez, yes. I believe it said personal emails for council members Peck and Christensen related to city business.
Okay,
So
so
without a time frame or a topic, or that's a broad.
it's extremely broad. I would suggest that I would not be in favor of analyzing everything, because I get emails from the city clerk, for instance, based on financial reporting for campaign funds that I've yet to expend, or various things like that have absolutely nothing to do with conducting the business of the city, rather as conducting myself in compliance with city codes concerning reporting of my financial contributions for unexpended campaign funds. And so I would only support the possibility of using council contingency funds or something to research this court request if the scope was specified as to the subject that is pertinent, being our center and Hope communication specifically, but not the general broad every single email that has concerned the city and the council members in question. So the $1,350, I don't know I can support that motion as stated due to the broadness of the inquiry.
Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. There was a comment about precedents, and I would suggest that the provocation for the core request is unprecedented. I'm a relative newcomer on council. Some of you have served in many years. I've only served a couple. But at least in my tenure, what provoked this is unprecedented. So we're in uncharted territory to some degree. There is no precedent for, not for core requests, but for the breadth of the request, number one. Number two, my motion wasn't to waive fees. It was to use contingency funds to cover the fees. Thirdly, I heard earlier what we owe developers in terms of certainty and clarity. I think we owe that to the public in terms of certainty and clarity. And in the interest of transparency, what provoked the request, we won't discuss tonight, but there's no question about what provoked the request. In the interest of transparency and accountability, that we wouldn't, as a council, be willing to commit that much money to resolve, one way or another, whether or not this is only dealing with the Hour Center and the and Hope and that scenario and that whole procurement process, or there are other issues that we ought to know about. To step away from that seems to me to be a willingness to be part of a cover-up, and I'm not willing to do that.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to use council contingencies, council contingency funds in the amount of $1,350 to pay for the citizens' Cora request. It's been moved and seconded. Nobody else is in the queue. Let's go ahead and, well, before I guess before we do this, I guess a couple things are coming to mind. 1,600 emails seems like a lot. And I can think of all kinds of reasons why somebody's personal email would pop up. You know, maybe somebody emails you and you upload it to the server or copy yourself. Oftentimes I will copy myself to my personal email because I don't get my city email on my iPad. And so I'll, you know, use my city email but copy myself so I can then have it later when I go and read something like Rigo's notes, right? So there's plenty of reasons to have innocuous, you know, personal emails pop up. I would even argue that, you know, I got a Cora request. There was a time when the developer kept emailing my personal email. I don't read my city emails. I have Elva Quintana do it, and if it's important, she tells me. And my instruction is if anybody corresponds with me on my personal email address, they're just ignored. I just do not even look at it. But when the city asked me, there was a Cora request, and somebody wanted to see all of them, I still provided them. So my concern isn't so much that people use their personal emails, it's that do we provide them once they're requested? And so I guess another possible reason, or another potential reason somebody's personal email would pop up is, I mean, their email chains, meaning that if Councilmember Hidalgo Faring emails me and then using her personal email to my personal email, and my personal email is then sent to Karen Dyke, and I send it to her personal email, and then she sends it to, sorry Karen, picking you out, and then she emails, you know, Councilmember Waters at his official city email address. It's going to contain Susie, me, Karen, and given, I guess I'm just surprised, A, that there's no discussion on recusal of this issue. I would recuse myself if I were voting. B, I guess the other issue is I certainly, when questioned, I would want no one to have any doubt. I mean, people can think I'm a jerk. People can think I'm a butthead. Would not want people thinking that I was somehow acting in a way that was not transparent. And so, I guess I'm going to vote for it, but I would also encourage people to ask why not. It's $1,350, and if there's nothing there, let's move on. All right, the queue is full again. All right, Councilmember Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I am a little bit concerned about the times that are being bandied about here. So, for example, when this controversy began, I searched my personal email to see how much correspondence that I had with Councilmember Peck, just because I got interrupted and didn't do Councilmember Christensen's the same search. But I did this for Councilmember Peck, and my personal email is Gmail, and I don't delete things from it, except occasionally, you know, spam things from the Washington Post or something like that that just clog things up. But I never have deleted any email from a private person. out of that account in the 15 years that I've had that Gmail account. And so I searched from Colin and Joan Peck's personal email, and I got 12 hits. So, and it took an unperceivable amount of time, you know, nanoseconds or something. Gmail produced that pretty quickly. So I'm not sure why it should take 15 hours for anybody to come up with all of those lists. Why don't we just go ask our 2 council members that are involved to please let us do that with their emails? Because I will tell you, if there were a Cora request for my emails, I would say, here you go. So it seems unreasonable to me that that it should be $13.50, and if that's the way if that's what it takes, then I really have 2 questions about that. One, why in this particularly fraught situation should we not waive it? And second, why can't council members Christensen and Peck reduce the cost by giving us direct access to their personal email accounts?
Councilmember Peck.
I'm sorry, I think that was funny. I would never give another person access to my email accounts, ever. So let's get this back to the original question. My emails are on the city server. That is what Dawn has said, because I replied to city emails. My personal emails, I don't have city business on, the ones that I originated. If there are from the city clerk emails that she has, it's because they're on the city server. They're not on the Google server, and they're not on the Indra server. That is where my personal emails would reside. So if Dawn says that she has, or the city clerk says she has emails from me, it's because they reside on that server, the city server. Correct? So it has nothing to do with my personal city emails. When I say that I don't have any, it's because I don't, but the city has them, and the city will retrieve those per the Cora request. And it is supposed to be about business, city business. This is not about Marcia Martin's emails, City Councilwoman Martin. It is not about the mayor's emails. It is about mine. It doesn't matter what they would do. They are not on the Cora request. So I am not going to vote to do this. I am not going to recuse myself. Ms. Cheney wanted these emails. She should have to pay the time that it takes for the city clerk to retrieve them.
Councilmember Christensen.
I'll give you an example, another example. Today, I received an email from a private citizen who had a complaint, and he frequently, when he does write me, he writes me on my personal email, which I do not know how he got a hold of, but he did get a hold of it. And he wrote first to City Clerk Quintana. And City Clerk Quintana, who's pretty busy, did not have time to check whether, in replying to this, he sent it to, I guess, me and to her. When she replied, it also came to my private email because that's what he had put in. I mean, this is just a nightmare, and I have asked him not to do this, so now I have to go through and then repost it to my city email, because even though it's on Dawn's email, it will not be on necessarily on my email. It's, you know, this is a very complicated thing. I get hundreds of emails on my private email every day from, you know, this is the giving season. This is Giving Tuesday, so I had 300 emails today on my private server, and then on the city email, I have many emails every day too. So this is why I have lots of emails. I've been on here for 6 years. As for what Councilman Martin said, many of those emails from Councilwoman Peck or from me may have been from the time before she was actually, if this is her private server, the time before she was elected, when there was a lot of, I corresponded with her because we were talking about her election, and I was supporting her election. And I certainly, that is not city business. That is certainly something you cannot use your city email to promote somebody else's campaign for. It has to be private, otherwise you're using taxpayer money to promote a political point of view or something. So that's another example of how you have to discern whether you cannot use your city email to promote something that is a private interest. Anyway, the one email, or what has been called the email stream, which is actually just one email to the Hour Center, which I have which the mayor released to the press, and I would gladly discuss, but I cannot discuss it because I may or may not, it may or may not be a pending issue. I haven't heard from the district attorney yet. That is on my public, that is on my city email now. Dawn has that. That's also on my city email. Anybody can look at it. The other little brief note that was Ms. Rush's question about something concerning Councilwoman Peck. I don't, you know, it was a brief little statement. So you could say that that's a string if you want to have two emails be a string. Anyway, that is also on the city email. Those are the two things concerning this issue. If people want to look at my medical records on my private email, that's against the law. If people want to, that's what it entails when you start. I have spent 15 hours going through my email account for the last 10 years, and that's what I found. But it did take me a long time because I'm kind of a hoarder with email, so I have lots and lots and lots of correspondence. So I won't be voting for this. I will not recuse myself because that would be ridiculous.
Councilmember Martin.
Actually, I didn't look, Councilmember Christensen, so I don't know how much pre-election correspondence you and I had. But that's pretty easy to filter out too with a simple query. But I'm much more concerned about statements that Councilmember Peck made just now, that she said that I would never show anyone my personal email. And it surprises me that she would make that statement because she just recently retook her oath of office, and one of the things that we are told when we are oriented to be on city council is that our private archives, electronic archives may be subject to search for a Cora. And I'm surprised she wouldn't know that, and that that assuming this office puts her under some obligation to allow an open record search to include her private archives.
All right, Dr. Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Bagley. I'm not, we've heard a lot, everybody gets a lot of emails, and I'm not certain exactly what Don said and how it's been interpreted. So I would amend, I'm gonna offer an amendment to my motion, and Councilmember Martin can decide whether she's willing to second the amended motion. So I'm gonna move that we commit whatever is required, which I suspect would be less than $1,350, but up to $1,350 out of the contingency fund, to review the private email accounts of Council Members Christensen and Peck for any email on the topics of the Hour Center, the Hope, and residential metro districts.
It's been moved, and the amendment has been accepted. So it's, the motion essentially has been made and seconded. And Councilmember Peck?
Eugene, can I ask a question of you? Does this not have to be a Cora request if Councilman Waters wants to look at my personal emails on certain subjects? He cannot just say he wants to do that. Is that, does this not have to, I mean, anybody could say that unless they go through the proper channels of a Cora request.
Mayor and council, if he wants to make that Cora request, he could.
But does this motion stand without a Cora request? That's what I am asking. It just seems totally improper to me that he would, he's basically amending Ms. Cheney's Cora request to specific subjects. Hers was pretty general, and now he wants to amend that. I guess my question is, can people, anyone, ask to see our personal emails without going through the proper channels of a Cora request?
You want me to answer? Do you want to answer? Is the chair or is the attorney?
Mayor, I don't think it's a legal question.
Yeah.
He could make I said he could make an open records request and do that. I think the matter of the validity of the motion is a matter of parliamentary procedure.
So what I was going to say is that he could make the motion, it could be seconded, but if there's not a subsequent Cora request, it's just going to sit out there forever, and it will just, nothing will happen. Dr. Waters, sorry.
Yeah, I'll clarify the intent, so just to clarify, and then we can decide whether or not it's a legitimate framing of the motion. To limit to the Cora request made by Ms. Cheney, to limit that request or define that request around those three topics: the Hour Center, she would have to obviously follow up on this, the Hour Center, Hope, and residential metro districts. Those three topics in personal email accounts. So the Google search would be pretty quick, I would think, but that we would cover those expenses if she were willing to make the adjustment in her Cora request on those three topics.
I guess jumping in, so are we restating the motion? So I would argue, I mean, hearing it, I would argue that essentially what I'm hearing is that you're saying the $1,350 she is responsible for, but we would cover the costs to look for emails that pertain to ours, the Hour Center, Hope, and the residential metro district issue. Okay. And then she would be responsible for whatever cost is in excess of that. And the motion specifically pertains to city emails, or you're saying to look personal emails or the personal servers of the council members? Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. I feel that it's completely inappropriate to cover Cora requests through council contingency funds, so I'll be voting against the issue regardless.
And Councilmember Christensen.
I believe that it's against the state law for, the city clerks in the state developed this thing several years ago, setting forth costs for city clerks to examine and fulfill Cora requests, and I believe this undermines state law. It undermines the city clerks, and it's just ridiculous, and it's once again trying to, it's completely inappropriate.
All right, we've all had our say. Let's vote. The motion, Councilmember Martin. All right. So the motion on the table is to utilize council contingency funds to assist in Ms. Cheney's Cora request insofar as it relates to ours, Hope, and the residential metro districts, specifically to council members Peck and Christensen's personal email accounts and their personal servers. That is the motion. It has been seconded. To the extent that they choose to comply or whatever, that's up to them, but that's the motion. So let's go ahead and vote. All right, the motion fails with Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, Councilmembers Peck and Councilmember Christensen, and Councilmember Hidalgo-Faring against, and myself, Councilmember Martin, and Dr. Waters, Councilmember Waters, for. Councilmember Martin.
My voting thing is still flashing. Is that okay? They all are, so I'm not sure what that means, but I guess I'll go ahead and speak anyway. I wanted to ask if 3 people, and this is, I guess, a question for the city clerk, so do I need a point of inquiry or something to ask this question at this point, Mr. Mayor?
You've got the floor. Just say what you're going to say.
Okay. I wanted to ask if 3 or 4 different individuals filed the same Cora request, or substantially the same Cora request, would the city charge the full cost of fulfilling that request to each of the citizens, therefore thereby collecting 4 times the cost of fulfilling the request?
I had to switch gears. I apologize. From taking notes to listening to the question. Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Martin. No, I think generally we would, once we've collected that information, we would provide it if we've already collected it. As long as it was exactly the same request. We don't hardly ever see that.
Okay. I'd like to make the same request. So, I guess I will settle up with the original requester in terms of splitting the fee with her, because I think that's an awful lot of money for her to have to pay. I wonder if there are any other people who would like to make the same request.
Councilmember Christensen.
So now we have the spectacle of council members calling for Cora requests on each other after several weeks of 2 70-year-old women being browbeaten by 2 rich guys, and publicly.
Hold on, point of order. I mean, point of order. I mean, nobody else is in the queue. I'll make this easy. I'm not browbeating. I'm one of the rich guys. I wrote a check. Ms. Cheney, compliments of myself, get the emails, 1,600. It's like, come on, let's see what's in there. Pass that down, please. Let's move on. Now, is there any objection to taking a break? All right, consensus states we shall take a break. All right. I know we're all tired and dreading continuing, but let's get going. Let's try to, Marcia can hear me and Susie can hear me. Let's get going again. I waited until you were just getting ready. I know. I know. Sorry, Councilmember Martin. Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda and introduction and reading by title of first reading of ordinances. City Clerk Don Quintana, could you please read us through the consent agenda? Actually, yeah, let's do that. Yep.
All right, item 8A is ordinance 2019-68, a bill for an ordinance making additional appropriations for the expenses and liabilities of the City of Longmont for the fiscal year beginning January 1st, 2019. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 17th, 2019. 8B is ordinance 2019-69, a bill for an ordinance supplementing special flood hazard areas under Title 20 on floodplain regulations. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 17th, 2019. 8C is ordinance 2019-70, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the City of Longmont to lease the real property known as the toll property, including associated water rights, and the distal property to Aggregate Industries WCR, Inc. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 17, 2019. 8D is ordinance 2019-71, a bill for an ordinance designating Turl Andrew Home located at 864 4th Avenue as a local historic landmark. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 17, 2019. 8E is ordinance 2019-72, a bill for an ordinance designating Cordova Anaya Home located at 710 Martin Street as a local historic landmark. Public hearing and second reading scheduled for December 17, 2019. 8F1 is ordinance 2019-73, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the City of Longmont to lease the real property known as Vance Brand Municipal Airport, hangar parcel H52 to Aaron Ramsey and Paul Kirby. 8F2 is ordinance 2019-74, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the City of Longmont to lease the real property known as Vance Brand Municipal Airport, hangar parcel H54 to Tim Cosmerl. 8F3 is ordinance 2019-75, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the City of Longmont to lease the real property known as Vance Brand Municipal Airport hangar parcel H57 to Mark Leonard. 8F4 is ordinance 2019-76, a bill for an ordinance authorizing the City of Longmont to lease the real property known as Vance Brand Municipal Airport hangar parcel H67 to David Finnemore and Paul Romano. All of those airport leases will have public hearing and second reading on December 17, 2019. 8G is resolution 2019-120, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the state of Colorado on behalf of Front Range Community College for a short-term facility use license for the use of the Longmont Museum. 8H is resolution 2019-121, a resolution of the Longmont City Council approving the intergovernmental agreement between the city and the city of Boulder, the Boulder Rural Fire Protection District, the Louisville Fire Protection District, the city of Lafayette, the Rocky Mountain Fire Protection District, and the Mountain View Fire Protection District for the Boulder Valley Fire Consortium for automatic and mutual aid. 8I is adopt the 2020 City Council meeting schedule, and 8J is approve the structure and selection of the Climate Action Task Force.
All right. Councilmember Martin?
Thank you. I would like to remove 8J from the consent agenda, please.
All right, we're going to move 8J. I'm actually going to move the consent agenda item, or I'm going to move the consent agenda absent item 8J. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. Let's move on to ordinances on second reading and public hearings on any matter. First, 9A, ordinance 2019-64, a bill for an ordinance amending Title 14, Chapter 14.04 of the Longmont Municipal Code on the water utility and wells. Are there any questions or debate from council? All right, at this time, seeing none, we'll open the public hearing on ordinance 2019-64. Anyone?
Mayor, Council, my name is Todd Williams. My address is 1521 Orion Place in Longmont. I'm the chairman of the Longmont Water Advisory Board. I'm here to give a recommendation of the Longmont Water Advisory Board to Council on future water supply development, in particular Longmont's participation in the Windy Gap Firming Project. A write-up of the recommendation from the Water Advisory Board is included as item 5 in the council's informational packet for tonight's meeting. Given the time limitations, I'm just going to give a real quick overview of the write-up, but be happy to answer any questions if possible. The council will have a number of agenda items related to Windy Gap over the next 6 to 8 months. The first one is tonight in the context of the second reading of the proposed water rates, which do include some funding for the Windy Gap firming project. The second of which is a week from now, when you're going to be meeting with some representatives from the municipal sub-district of the Northern Colorado Water Conservancy District. So the Water Board wanted to give its recommendation in advance of these discussions. First off, it's the duty of the Water Board to adopt, revise, and continually update the raw water master plan for the development of an adequate raw water supply. That's the first charge that we are given from the council to the Water Board. To this end, the Water Department staff has been updating water supply and demand evaluations such that the evaluation of Windy Gap firming and other water supply projects could be evaluated and presented to the Water Board. One key element in the valuation of the water supply is how a temporary trade agreement with Public Service Company of Colorado is viewed. This trade involves Longmont giving Public Service Company low-quality water not available for potable treatment. Longmont gives that to Public Service in exchange for high-quality Colorado Big Thompson Project water that is available for treatment by Longmont. It's a very good deal for the city. The Longmont Water Board recommends that the Public Service Company trade is not included within Longmont's water supply when doing long-term planning, given it is not a permanent water supply. Without including the Public Service Company trade, Longmont needs all of the 8,000 acre-feet of Windy Gap firming that's currently in the second reading and would be the maximum participation level currently to meet the current projected build-out water demands under current assumptions. If Longmont were to go below the 8,000 acre-foot of storage, it would require Longmont to look at other water projects to make up the loss in yield. The other projects are inferior in Water Board's opinion to the Windy Gap firming at 8,000 acre-feet. I give more detail on our reasoning in the write-up within the council informational packet. The Longmont Water Board understands that 8,000 acre-feet of Windy Gap firming will add to the proposed water rate increases in the near term and has impacts to water customers. But we believe it is the lowest cost and least risk option for Longmont to continue its legacy of providing sufficient high-quality supplies to its customers at build-out of the city. Thank you.
All right. Let's see here. Yeah, we can. So hold on one second. We have a public hearing though at this point. Anyone else want to speak? Ken? Water guru? Nothing? No? All right. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close the public hearing. You want to say? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, oh, yeah, sorry.
In your memo, you make the statement that it's likely the trade agreement with CBT for CBT water will end.
Yes.
I didn't find any rationale to support the statement, so I'm curious, why have you arrived at that conclusion?
Well, first of all, I think it was about a 75-year agreement. There's a 15-year opt-out clause within it. So CBT water is currently selling for around $56,000 per unit, which if you correlate that onto a per acre foot basis is about $80,000 per acre foot. So at that value, there may be other options that Piesco would have, or Excel at this point, to supply that water at a much cheaper cost would be one thing.
So they'd get cheaper water somewhere else through the agreement with us.
Correct. That's one concern. There may also be a change with regards to their demands. They use that for cooling water for a number of their downstream power plants, and if there were to be changes with their operations down the road, that would potentially also change their demand or need for that water. So there's a number of scenarios upon which I think that water could go away. The fact that the city doesn't own it is the reason why we're stating that, you know, it's not a permanent supply. It's part of albeit a long-term, it's still a temporary trade agreement.
As I recall, I was sitting up there when the council was dealing with the Windy Gap project and 6 versus 8 versus 10,000 feet and listened to the Water Board recommendation then. And I just trying to get a sense of how much of this is speculation, or is there something we've heard? I mean, I understand the relationship of cost and value, right? And if the cost exceeds the value, they're going to look someplace else. But this is a judgment call that we're hearing from the water board.
It is, but it is based on, and I have to commend staff, they've done quite a bit of analysis both on water supply and demand. So the numbers that we're talking about, if you take out the PSCO trade from the supply part of the equation, you need the full 8,000 to meet the current projected build-out demand, so there's not speculation in that context. And I may turn to Ken if he can yank on me. He's a lot more familiar with the analysis that's been done, but that's my understanding.
Can you assign a probability to it? 80%, 50%, 90% chance that at some point in the foreseeable future that agreement will get terminated and we'll have 15 years to figure out some options?
I can't really give you a probability. I can just tell you that, the variables include, the use of the water downstream by the power plant, the cost of the water, which is a definite right now. The price that I mentioned earlier is an auction price that occurred within the last 2 months.
All right, thanks.
All right, Councilmember Peck?
Mayor Bagley, I apologize, I missed the council comments. Would you mind if I asked a question of Dale Radley?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Dale. I contacted you a couple of weeks ago about its utility rate increase on the water. And you had said, let me just, I understood that this increase was because of that 2017 ballot language for the Windy Gap, where we voted for the 8,000 acre as well as knowing that it would be an increase in the water rates. Is this water rate increase partly because of that vote? Because of the Windy Gap increase?
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Peck, if I understand your question correctly, is there any
correlation?
Cost impact in the current rate increase? I'll look back to Becky. She might be able to help me with this better. So in the scheme of things, I think we went to the vote, what was that, 2017?
I think it was.
And we had the rates in place to cover the debt service at the time. And that the current rate increase is more driven, if not solely driven, by future capital expenses like the Nelson Flanders treatment plant. So
it had nothing to do, this rate increase has nothing to do with it?
To say nothing is
okay.
I try to not talk in absolutes.
Okay.
In my world, absolutes don't ever play out well. So when I say largely, and to the major extent, I believe the prior rate increase, the one that ended this year, was structured in such a way as to pay the debt service on the bond.
Okay. And the reason that I asked that question is that residents have been saying that council is increasing our water rates when in fact that was part of the vote that they voted for the Windy Gap.
And that would be accurate for the rates that have been into place up to now. The rates going forward are, again, primarily driven by the additional capital costs, both in the Nelson Flanders plant and our ongoing renovation costs to maintain the reliability of the system.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Bagley.
All right, do we have a motion? All right, I will move ordinance 9A, 2019-64. It's been moved and seconded. Oh, by the way, we closed the public hearing. So thank you for coming back after the closing and answering those questions. All right, let's go ahead and vote. All right, that passes unanimously. All right, let's move on to item 9B, ordinance 2019-65, a bill for an ordinance amending Title 14.32 of the Longmont Municipal Code on rates and regulations governing electric service. Seeing no questions from council, let's open the public hearing on ordinance 2019-65. Anyone want to come down and speak? All right, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. All right, seeing no one else in the queue, do we have a motion? Oh, sorry, Councilmember Susie Hidalgo-Faring.
And I know, get up in here. So in looking at the electric rates, the water rates. I had a few questions as far as the impacts on our senior citizens, low income, and looking at the rebates. And so I just had a few questions around accessibility. So I know we have the CARES, Longmont CARES system, and I guess I just wanted some background or the accessibility for people to utilize these to offset the cost of the increase in rates, and how accessible are they for our average resident?
Mayor, may I answer?
You may.
Okay, great. Mayor Bagley, members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. Thanks for that question. It's a great question, and this is great timing because this is really our time where we try to push the CARES program is usually between January and tax time to try to have people really apply. The application process is very simple. There's an application online that can also be printed, can also be found at many city facilities where people can help folks to actually fill out the application. And the income qualification is pretty much any other income qualifier. So for example, if you qualify for LEAP or for SNAP, all these wonderful acronyms, for free and reduced lunch through the schools, 104 PTC, which is a property tax, any of those kinds of qualifications, you just provide your letter of qualification with a very simple application, and we then give the full amount of the rebate for grocery tax, electric, water, anything that's eligible. So in some cases, people don't have, one of those utilities, and so they're not eligible for that particular rebate. But that is then rebated for the entire year. So we'll be advertising heavily this program. Senior citizens, for example, can fill this out at the senior center. They have volunteers that are there pretty much during that time frame that I mentioned to try to help with that application process. Again, we have process online. You can fill it out at the youth center. You can have utility billing folks help, community neighborhood resources folks. We understand that it may be a little intimidating, although it's 5 or 6 questions, so we hope it's not too intimidating.
So that was going to be my next question, is how lengthy is the process? So I work in a Title I school where we have nearly 100% free reduced lunch. A lot of my students do not have access to internet at home. So, we kind of work around the system. Is there, have you guys included anything, in our bill, we have the City Line little newsletter where maybe information could be put on there so people can access paper form as well?
Yes, Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Hidalgo Faring, we have certainly advertising in the City Line. We don't usually put the actual application in City Line.
Yeah,
because,
of course not.
for the paper sites, but we also have paper applications in all those city facilities that I was talking about.
So they could call
they
you-
can call, they can go in, we can help them to fill out the application. We want people to be able to access the service. And so we have agreements with folks from Senior Center, Youth Center, Community Neighborhood Resources, and of course our own utility billing folks to be able to help people fill those out, have the applications available, and we advertise that starting in January.
Okay, so and I guess my biggest concern before moving forward with the electric rates was really just, there are families, there are elderly, low income, who every dollar matters. And so if we're finding that the rebate, what we've allotted for the rebate isn't enough, when can we go back and look back to maybe increase that? What is the possibility of being able to go in and increase that amount?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of a rates question, really.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I think
rates,
I'll turn that
yeah.
question over
Yeah.
to Becky, actually, if that's all right.
Good evening, Mayor Bagley, Councilmember Hidalgo Faring. I'm Becky Doyle, PWNR rate analyst, and I just wanted to add, we've seen approximately 150 households receive this rebates through the CARES program this year at an average amount of $300. So it's pretty impactful in a household's budget. And at this point, we have not come close to budgeted amounts for any of the rebates. So, we're keeping an eye on that, and it's certainly something that we'll consider as part of our financial plans moving forward. But there's capacity, certainly, to help a lot more people.
Okay.
And I think that if there's a question on capacity, it would be something that we would have as part of our budget conversation.
Next year?
In the summer,
In
if
the
we
summer.
saw anomalies, and we need
Okay.
to look at it.
Okay.
And Mayor and members of council, we would really just encourage you, as you're out and about in the community, to point people to that CARES program or to just ask about it at any city facility. because really we want for people to be able to take advantage of that. We recognize the struggle for some of our residents, and we really want for them to. So if you really have all those people on free and reduced lunch, bring them.
I will. I will.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and, I think we can just go ahead and, do we have a public hearing on this? We did, we closed it, right? All right, let's go ahead and vote. Do we have a motion? All right, let's vote. All right, that passes unanimously. All right, ordinance 2019-66, a bill for an ordinance authorizing a lease agreement between the city of Longmont as lessee and the Archdiocese of Denver as lessor for use of the St. John the Baptist Church parking lot for Longmont city employee parking. Seeing that there are no questions from council, let's go ahead and open the hearing on ordinance 2019-66. Would anyone like to come down and talk? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and close the public hearing. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Let's go ahead and vote. That passes unanimously. Finally, ordinance 2019-67, a bill for an ordinance amending Title IV, Chapter 4.08 of the Longmont Municipal Code on city rebate programs for income qualified residents. Seeing no questions from council, let's go ahead and open the public hearing on ordinance 2019-67. Would anyone like to address council on this issue? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and close the public hearing. Can we have a motion? All right, turn on your microphone. This is an important day. This is important. All right, Susie, Councilmember Hidalgo, I want to say Susie Hidalgo Faring because it's like one of those AOC names. It's just like it rolls off the tongue, right?
Go for it.
Councilmember Hidalgo Faring.
So I moved
Ordinance
201967.
7. All
Yes,
right.
thank you.
It's been moved and seconded. Let's go ahead and vote, seeing no further debate.
Yeah, I know.
Councilmember Christians? Okay, cool. All right, that passes unanimously. All right, we're going to move on to, before we move on from items from the consent agenda, I am aware of an issue with a personal council member, and I'm going to we've only got this one issue left, and I'm actually going to make a motion that we expel you from council chambers if you do not leave voluntarily. All right, thank you. All right, so let's move on to, and she will be excused. All right, so let's go on to approving the structure and selection of Climate Action Task Force. Dr. Waters? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Martin, I apologize. You have some, I'm sure you do.
Yeah. So first of all, I would like to thank the community of Longmont for their response to the Climate Emergency Task Force. We could have filled the entire task force with people with doctorates in relevant fields. That was not the goal. We tried to have a diverse selection of people, although we did manage to get a doctorate in every selected category of climate science that we thought would be useful. But we also have community organizers, we have translation and outreach specialists, and we have people who are likely to be highly impacted by climate change. So I just want to say that when it came down to the final choices, we couldn't do it. And the selection committee could not move from a short list of 10 people to a short list of 8 people, which was the original number of residences. So the selection committee decided to petition the council to allow us to increase the number of resident representatives to 10, because we thought that there was unique value to be brought by every single individual in that group of 10, and we wanted you all to be there. So I have a couple of things, a couple of minor motions that I think should be added to the council or to the direction on the committee that somehow were overlooked. Um, Can I make those motions first and then move adoption of this resolution?
Well, I guess the, hold on a second here. Let me pull up something real quick. So, I mean, I guess what I'm just sitting here thinking is that what we're doing right now is expand, so one, approve the expansion of resident task force members from 8 to 10 and the addition of one staff member and approve all recommended applicants, or
Yes.
approve some, but not all recommended applicants.
Yes.
So right now, we're just dealing with that issue.
Okay, you
Right?
want me to deal with that issue first?
Let's
then?
deal with that issue, and then
Okay.
if you want to add related motions later, let's talk about that. But-
Okay.
But that's what I'd prefer, but then again, I'm only one of 7.
All right, well, I would like to move that we follow the selection committee's recommendation to expand the size of the task force by adding one staff member and 2 additional residents, making it a total of 10 residents and 4 staff members, and to approve the structure and selection as recommended.
That's been moved by Councilmember Martin and seconded by Councilmember Peck. There's people in the queue. Is there anyone that wants to debate this, or can we go ahead? All right, let's go ahead and vote. Or do you want to say something, Councilmember Christensen? All right, Councilmember Christensen.
I do think, I'm very happy to hear that you've added a couple of people. I understood from what I was reading that one of them was from planning, which is good because buildings are really critical in the future, in conservation and in smart technology and various things. And also I thought there was, Phil Greenwald was going to be added from transportation, which is of course huge. So could you clarify whether that's the case, that both of those staff members will be added? And secondly, I know you can't get everything. I really congratulate you for the whole group of Lisa and you and was it David? Okay. In trying to get a diverse group of people with different skills. I was a little, I didn't see much in the way of land usage and agriculture, which is, or conservation or biology, but maybe well, you know, maybe I didn't see that. So I would hope that I would encourage you to add some of those other things or find people to testify in. Those are important issues in terms of climate action. So anyway, could you clarify that the building, someone from the planning department and someone from transportation will be on that board?
Councilmember Martin?
Yes, I can. The roster is also linked into the packet, at least. I think the link was broken for a while, but it's fixed. And so, yes, all of the sources that you were talking, the people that you were talking about are on the committee. And if you look at the resumes of the scientists in the group, land use is covered. And also, it turns out that the person who oversaw the development of the first City of Denver Climate Action Plan is a Longmont resident. So whenever we're short of expertise, we can probably turn to him. It really is a blue ribbon panel, and we could not be happier with this selection.
Dr. Waters. On her motion, yes. So, all right, the motion is to add one staff member and 2 more residents, bringing the total members of the task force up to 10. So let's vote. And approving the recommended list. Well, actually, and approving the recommended list. All right, go ahead, let's vote. That passes 6 with 6 votes for, and Councilmember Susie Hidalgo Faring with an excused absence. All right, so we have got some people in the queue, and I imagine there's motions pertaining to this. Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor. No, I don't really have a motion. I have a question about it. I'm questioning the $50,000 study that I'm sorry, it's not a study. I misinterpreted that. Consultant. And the reason I'm questioning it is that it looked like from what I read that we were partnering with or corroborating with Boulder County, and I know that the city of Boulder as well has done a climate emergency plan. Do they have individual consultants as well on this? Are they using in-staff? I'm questioning as to why we need a $50,000 consultant.
Mayor Bagley and Councilmember Peck, Lisa Knoblach, Sustainability Program Manager with Public Works and Natural Resources. When we started to put this whole process together and make sure that it's working in collaboration with the Just Transition Plan that's happening and the number of other projects that we've talked to you about that are happening in early 2020, it's a considerable amount of staff time to, one, make sure all of those things are going to be working strategically together, as well as prepare all of the meeting materials, do the meeting facilitation, provide translation that's likely going to be needed, probably not in the Climate Action Task Force, but in the Just Transition Committee, prepare meeting notes and do all of the follow-up on that. And we felt like that was beyond what staff currently has capacity for and that we would need some outside support for that. We put out an RFQ with those requirements that we were looking for, and that's the budget that came back with some of those consultants, was just under the $50,000. I can't speak to what the city of Boulder is doing with regards to their climate action plan. I'd be happy to reach out to them and see if I can get more information about that. It's not out of the ordinary for people to pull in consultants in a number of different capacities to help with support with efforts like this.
Okay, I guess my concern was that if we are going to have a task force of people who are acknowledged in this field, is that not what the task force is for? I'm confused about what the consultant would do that is different from what the task force would do. Are we not pulling together all this information through the task force?
It's not necessarily, excuse me, Councilmember Peck, it's not necessarily a matter of pulling the information together. We are looking for folks that can really bring some of that expertise. It's more about helping with the meeting facilitation, the translation, looking for providing the notes, all of the follow-up stuff that goes into pulling those groups together, which is a pretty substantial amount of time from the staff capacity side.
So it's more of a managerial type of position rather than resource.
So I think to help Lisa, we have a lot of work that's occurring within the broader sustainability piece, and council has said we want this in 120 days.
Okay.
And so in managing all of that, we've got to turn this in 120 days, and so you have other components that come into play, and so I think it's facilitating the broader workload amongst all of these things so we can meet the sense of urgency that is requested in this.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Dr. Waters.
Well, I have a number of questions, and one of them is about the consultant. Because I guess it begs the exchange I just heard begs the question, what would you have to not do? What would you stop doing in order to deliver on 120 days, right? Deliver in 120 days, a set of recommendations. Because Harold, as you mentioned, there's a lot of other stuff going on. I mentioned to you earlier today, there was a lot of other stuff going on in 2013 when a flood hit. But you cleared the decks and responded to an emergency, right, a crisis. And I value the work of sustainability, whether it's our sustainability plan or anybody's plan, right, that focuses on sustainability. But there's a big difference between sustainability, at least in my perspective, in triaging or responding to an emergency. There's a different kind of urgency. There's a whole different prescription, right, in terms of what you do. If I walk in with chest pains to the emergency room, I expect people to respond to an emergency. After that, there's a sustainability plan: lose weight, exercise, change your diet, doo-dah, right? So I guess I'm wondering if we need a consultant because we're going to do business as usual and try to meet a 120-day deadline. Because if that's the case, I want to say, what's the business as usual that ought to be sidelined? Because this is the top priority. It's either an emergency or it's not. And if it's an emergency, it seems like it's all hands on deck. If we need the consultant to respond to the emergency as you clear stuff away. But and I have to say that issue kind of folds into some others here. What gets my attention is a reference to a just transition committee that as I read this, when I first part of the information, I thought, well, we have a just transition committee because it was created in 2016. When I got farther into it, I read, no, we don't have a just transition committee. It doesn't exist yet. It's going to meet sometime in 2020. And then I see the work of that in conjunction with the task force, and I'm going, wait a minute. Why would the task force have to wait on a committee that hasn't been formed yet? That doesn't feel like an emergency. That feels like slowing down a group that we said you're in and out, right? When I see the reference in here to maybe we'd want to consider delaying the response time, I'm going to go, really? If we have a crisis, we heard tonight from Karen, and we've heard before, there is no delay here, right? This needs to have full attention, right? And we need to respond accordingly. So I have no interest in delaying timelines. Then I see a report. By the way, what we said, I think we said to your task force is, you're in and out. This reads like you may be in for a while, and people may be willing to be in for a while. But I wouldn't want to get a report in 120 days that doesn't have a set of recommendations in it, right? If it's a progress report without recommendations, I'm saying we should have been clearer when we created the task force on October 8th. So there's a whole series of those kinds of things that the feel of this, I love the committee, right? The structure of it, I think you've got an A team. I don't want to put an A team into a situation where they're saying, why are we waiting on a group that doesn't exist? I'm not certain who's going to appoint that group, and why they should, not that just transition isn't important, it is, but I guess that's going to come down the road since we haven't even identified who's on the committee yet, and we have identified on this one. So I'm looking at you. I should be looking at Lisa or Dale, because I did talk to Dale about this earlier today. That's my concern. Right?
So let me take this. One, council said 120 days report recommendations. That's what we have to do.
And for as far as I'm concerned, we could start that tonight.
And so
but then let's put a pin on the calendar and say, deliver.
Part of, I think, the conversation that Dale and I had is we've lost time going through this process. And so I think 30, 40 days, somewhere in there, so we're around 80 days. So that's one of the perspectives. We're also going into the holidays, which you combine that with the time you lost, that's an issue. And so I think, at least from my mind, that's how I was seeing that, is where do we stick the pin and what do we consider to be the start on the 120 days. If you say it was when the resolution was passed, then we've got to do the work.
You got about 65 days left.
Correct. And with the holidays in the mix.
I'm not suggesting that.
That poses a different issue.
I'm saying start it tonight. I'm just saying.
So.
Let's take it seriously.
Correct.
Let's put it on the calendar and understand there are no alternatives. There's no plan B, right, in terms of delivering on a set of recommendations within 120 days.
So 120 days, very clear. The question was the start time. The way I saw, and in conjunction with the, and I keep dropping this.
The Just Transition Committee versus the Climate Action Task Force.
Is that whenever you look at this, that has to be a component of the evaluation because you can't just ignore the Just Transition component.
But do you understand my concern here?
Correct.
We don't even know who's on that group, and we don't know when they're scheduled to meet.
Correct. And so, so the second piece is I say that in Harold's mind, that has to be part of the conversation that occurs with it. What was your third question?
I don't know. I was on a rant.
Yeah. So So what I will say is, we
You
understand.
get my concern.
Here was the next.
Is the consultant, it's the slowing down of the task force, it's the timeline, it's inviting people on, I don't want to do a bait and switch unless they want to stay long-term. This was in and out for 120 days. And clear the decks and set the priorities and get it done.
Correct. And I think the thing that hasn't been clear in the conversation is what do we do with the other work that we have to do? And that's a piece that, and to this point, there hasn't been, to say, any direction from council that says we're okay with slowing down something else in this world.
I think you ought to bring that back.
And
So we can
so I
say,
think for me,
take it
part
off
of
the
it
table.
is evaluating that versus a consultant, and we may be able to do it all. But the reality is that's another piece to the puzzle.
I'm suggesting you're not going to do it all. Right?
And I
that's
can't
what
answer
priorities
you,
are
right.
about. And this
Yeah.
goes right to the top of the list as a priority, it seems to me.
Correct.
That's
And
just me.
I mean,
You'll hear from, if anybody else shares that feeling, you'll hear from them.
Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Bagley. There are a few things, and in pretty much aligned with what Dr. Waters had to say. There is some stuff at the end of the council's direction on this that was a surprise to me when I saw it. What the selection committee did discuss was the idea that we should have a paid facilitator. And the main reason in my mind for having a paid facilitator is to make the best use of the really brilliant group of people that we will have assembled, and let somebody be the chair who can deal with organizational behavior, especially when, you know, you've got a lot of divas in the same room. And let's do a really effective, efficient job of organizing this committee. So I am 100% for that. I also agree with Dr. Waters that I'm not sure that we need other expertise besides that, because we've got some serious expertise on many axes on this committee. So I really could not be happier with what we already have. But there are a few things about the expressed intent on how the results of this committee are going to be handled, and its relationship in other things that are on the Sustainability Department's plan that are kind of a surprise. And I think we need to have some clarification on that. And I have a couple of motions that would, I think, clarify that. So my first motion is that the recommendations from the committee after the 120-day interval, whatever that should be, and we need to decide that too, because we have eaten up quite a bit of it. But the recommendations of the Climate Task Force should come directly to council and be accepted or modified by the council. And at that time, the sustainability program of the city may, but doesn't have to, submit recommendations of their own with respect to the recommendations of the task force. So first of all, I'd like to make that motion. I went through all the stuff, and it never explicitly says that the council has to accept the recommendations. So let's get that out there first. I move that.
So I'll second it, and I'm going to restate the motion, you can correct me. And that is just make sure that when the Climate Task Force is done, that it will be brought to council for acceptance or modification, or modification.
Yes, and that the Sustainability Organization may submit its own recommendations at that time, if it wishes to.
You mean
Lisa's group.
the newly changed group name?
No, not the advisory board, although that's a possibility too.
Who are you referring to then?
I'm referring to the staff
Oh, got it. Okay, so let's vote. Sorry, Councilmember Christensen?
Did anybody second that?
I did.
Oh, you did, okay.
It seems to me that both Lisa's organization and the Sustainability Advisory Board should review that as well.
All right, and I'll second that amendment. Let's vote. All right, that passes with 6 of us unanimously voting and in the affirmative, with Councilmember Susie Duggle-Faring absent. All right, that is it. Let's move on to. Well, nobody's in the queue. Go ahead. Well, you're okay. Hit the button. All right, Councilmember Martin.
Thank you. I move that the 120-day interval begins on the day of the first meeting of the Climate Action Task Force, because it's going to take a few days to make sure that all the people nominated have accepted, and they have to go through and find a day that they can all meet.
Second. All right, let's vote. All right, that passes all 6 of us, with Councilmember Duggle-Faring absent. All right, Dr. Waters? All right, Councilmember Christensen?
Yeah, I do have a few things. First of all, we do have a just transition person. We've had her for quite some time, Francine. Yes. And she's already been having meetings, doing workshops. I attended one. So it's not that we don't have anything there. The second is, if we're hiring somebody for $50,000 for a consultant, and we have somebody who set up the task force in Denver, I would think that within that group they could set up their own chairman or something, rather than pay yet another consultant to do this. That doesn't strike me as a very necessary thing. When we have the man who set up the task force in Denver, I think that people should be able to select from within themselves a facilitator.
Councilmember Martin?
I don't think necessarily that the chairperson and the facilitator are the same person. We were not given the opportunity to interview the people selected. One thing that we might be able to do is interview the people selected, and the person in question is in fact the most likely candidate from within the group to be the facilitating chair. And so we could find out whether he is willing to take on that role and only hire the paid facilitator after that for the second meeting on. But again, it's a question of what use of the committee's time, how we make the best use of the committee's time. I would also like to ask for clarification about the $50,000, because I don't know if that is the price of one paid facilitator. Well, was what I assumed. But if there are other consultancies involved, I'm not sure we need any of them but the paid facilitator.
The facilitator is a piece of it. There are broader components to this. And on that point, I need to spend some time with Lisa and Dale and everybody involved to understand what the operational issues are and what can we hold, what can we not hold, and then if there's any conflicts in terms of council direction, I'll need that back. If it's purely operational, I can make those decisions. Okay.
One thing I would like to put some kind of a time box on this and get in contact. There's all sorts of micro procedures that we haven't really detailed. So is Dawn going to be calling each of those people and confirming that they accept? And we did ask them in their applications when they couldn't meet, but nobody was very detailed about it. So that task probably needs to be remanaged, and I think since this is an emergency and it's supposed to take priority over everything, we should time box this and have it ready for the next council meeting.
So the way the council states is, upon passage of this, staff will begin contacting everyone. Typically when we do this, you want to schedule the first meeting because it's easier to get a first meeting date than try to get every meeting date.
Mhm.
And then when you get everyone there, then they can kind of talk about their availability and work it out. And so we do see this starting tomorrow.
Great.
Or
I'm
I
happy
see
with
it
that.
starting tomorrow.
All right, so nobody else is in the queue, and we're about ready to end. But I wanted to just kind of I mean, you guys can prepare or whatever, but I'm going to start I'm going to start ruling motions out of order if they conflict with a motion that has been adopted at any previous time and is still in force, specifically standing rules. So the standing rule we have right now is giving city staff direction. And then we all passed and made a standing rule, that we will not give deadlines to city staff. And so I'm just letting everybody know so that it's not politics coming up. I have no idea. I intentionally didn't do it tonight on metro districts, for example, because I didn't want to play politics. But when we make a motion, I'm going to rule it out of order if we're setting dates. Because we almost made another one, meaning next week. I mean, it will become impossible for them to keep up with this council. And so the standing rule is we give them direction, they prioritize and tell us what comes off rather than us giving dates. So, Councilmember Christensen?
That rule was passed under the previous council, and perhaps we should re-examine that. But the city manager and the city attorney always, of course, have the discretion to say that they cannot possibly do that. So I think we should have a discussion about that.
And that would be fine. I'm just saying that I meet with Harold multiple times during the week to prepare the agenda and oftentimes employees do not tell the boss, you know what, you are just working me too hard. I hear that frequently. And so I'm just looking out for city staff. So I'm making the general comment rather than focusing on any specific issue. All right, let's move on to mayor and council comments. Anybody in the queue? No. Councilmember Christensen?
I would like to do we have, did we do public invited to be heard, final public invited to be heard?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's go ahead and, let's do that. Sorry. Let's move on to final call, public invited to be heard. Anyone want to come up and speak for 3 minutes? All right, we will close final call, public invited to be heard. Councilmember Peck. I'm sorry, Councilmember Christensen.
I wanted to let people know that for those who are interested in affordable housing, there is a meeting of the County Home, HOME Consortium. If people want to know what we're doing on a countywide basis, the meeting is at the Hub, which is the Boulder County St. Vrain Community Hub at 515 Kaufman, room 1125. And it is, I'm sorry, I have to look up the exact time. It's this week. It is 2 to 4 on Thursday. The second thing I would like to say is that today, at least 4 of us happened to go to the Micah Homes Project, which was initiated by the United Congregational Church with a donation of land, and then followed up with the In-Between and used Cresci Construction. And this is an an incredible example for exactly what we need and exactly what we need for infill development and for development. This was all put together with the city council gave them a low-cost loan. The city, the county gave them a grant. Money was raised from the church and from several other churches and from many citywide organizations. This is just a great example of a beautiful architecture and a small infill development that is close to a bus line. They can walk to shops and services. They can walk to downtown. They're right across from the high school. It's right up the street for me, and it's a terrific example of what this town can do when we all give a little bit. We don't need to, we can, you know, build really decent housing with this kind of method. Thank you.
Councilmember Peck.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to echo what Councilwoman Christensen just said, and this would be an incredible pilot program for the city to look at for any city-owned land, rather than try to get a developer on private land. But if we own city land, it's a great example of what we can do, and it's very tastefully done. The other thing I want to say is kudos to Kimberly McGee for the downtown this holiday season. It's decorated incredibly, but also the Christmas tree lighting ceremony was really well put together with a lot of people there. I don't know exactly how many people were there, but I would say maybe 200. Well attended by every age group, and the kids had a great time. So kudos to Kimberly and everyone else that was involved in that.
All right, nobody else is in the queue. I guess the only thing I'd like to do is Reverend Betty Brown and Reverend James Ray, the senior pastor at the Second Baptist Church. They're going to be having their annual winter concert on December 8th at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at 5300 Baseline Road in Boulder. And you can contact them at 303-499-4668. I don't know if we can get that in there, but anyway, that's the flyer. So we would invite everybody, or they would invite everybody to come out and participate. So that said, City Manager, do you have any remarks?
No comments, Mayor, Council.
Mr. May?
No comments, Mayor.
All right. Is anyone opposed that we adjourn? All right. All in favor? Aye. All right. Anybody opposed? All right. We're adjourned.